first things first, you run a design agency called Nooh, which is Nooh, which is quite an
I got my
unusual name.
badge. Where is it?
You got a
There.
badge on.
I've
Look at
got my
that.
badge.
Repping Lucy and Yak as
Merch.
well.
And you seen Yak times? Not yet.
Well, keep pushing. I'm sure you keep doing the promo because I always ask you where you get your clothes when you post on LinkedIn because you're always wearing cool stuff, and then it's always like, yeah, Lucy and Yak. So look, where does the name come from? NOOH. What's the story there? Because it feels like there is one.
Yes, so Nooh, it's supposed to be like Happy New Year, that kind of thing. Happy New Year, new brand, new you, and then the puns go a bit far, but I didn't actually name it based on that. It's my childhood comfort blanket is called Nooh, Noonoo, and so it's half of Nunu with an H on the end.
Just added that on for
Helena. And then it was a middle of the night idea. But actually, what's been really nice is we branded it because it launched as Nooh Studio about a year and a half ago now.
Mm-hmm.
Is that our branding has a story that's aligned with that as well. So, for example, all our graphics, I call it graphic glue, is all little hand drawn squares because Nunu's a square. And it's this idea that you're thinking inside and outside the box. And yeah, it's a kind of creative, safe space.
You still got your blanket. Is that why you said it is?
I will not disclose this information.
Okay, that's fair enough. So let's go back to the start. So why did you start an agency? Because I was kind of forced into this world, but I don't think that you were. I think this is a path that you chose. Is that right? So why did you start, and were you always of the opinion that you would sort of grow your own business?
So going back a bit, so I'm a graphic designer by trade. I studied at Central St Martin's. I don't think I knew what an agency was when we were at uni, and obviously Central St Martin's being a wacky art school, they were all talking about going in-house at Apple and Google and all that kind of stuff. And as I kind of came out into lockdown, because that was 2019, graduated, I started working for agencies, and I started kind of seeing how creative work can be done in an agency, in a practice. But what really started, I guess, my interest in the storytelling in that piece, I can show you my book. So this is where the kind of, I guess, the story begins. This is 100 stories, and it's got 100 stories of people affected by cancer, because my dad has had brain tumors for 24 years, so kind of grown up around illness. And you can see like there's portraits and stories of over 100 people, and I did that as part of uni, and then kickstarted it in a Kickstart campaign, and that kind of opened up interest into agencies kind of picking up on it. We funded £9,000 in 4 weeks, and I published it as a book. And so that, along with freelancing them for agencies, was kind of like, oh, this is a thing. And I think that in parallel with, I never wanted a boss, I've never had a boss, I don't really want a boss. I think we'll come on to ADHD, but yeah, I've got ADHD, and that's part of it, is that I, writing my own destiny, doing my own thing, as cliche as it sounds. And so then from freelance fell into being an agency owner.
Yeah, firstly, like, kudos on the book. Like, my mum got a lung cancer diagnosis last year, and is thankfully sort of like, touch wood, she had the kind of remission chat not this morning, in January this year. So I went with her and held her hand through that, and that was quite just going through that journey, because obviously it affects loads of people, and you've grown up and lived with it. So I can't imagine how challenging that must have been. Like, this was kind of a sort of 6-month whistle stop, get her into like, and that was a really harrowing story, really difficult. Like, the repercussions and the ripples and all of that stuff that kind of filters out from there is pretty difficult to deal with. And like, the conversations can be tough and difficult. So like, having those stories published is amazing, really. So nice work. Can people get that? Is that available for purchase?
So 500 were printed, and they're all around the world. And we had a launch party at Maggie's, the cancer charity. I'm looking at doing a reprint, so watch this space. But I've got a digital version if anybody wants one.
Yeah, give me a link. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And it's interesting you said about going from never wanting to have a boss. A friend of mine who I'm doing some work with, actually, like, he was of that similar mindset, and it just wasn't, that never really crossed my mind. I just always assumed like you go into the world of work and you find a job. But it's interesting that you were always of that opinion, like you never wanted to have a boss. So what is different about Nooh? Like, what sets you apart from other kind of creative agencies? Or actually, like, how did you go from like from being that freelancer into actually like, I'm going to set up an agency and grow an agency? And then what's like different about you?
So the story of the agency, well, it kind of started as a limited company, was a few years into freelancing, and I was actually pitching up against another agency who was trying to take one of my clients, and I was this little Helena in the corner with this kind of big agency, and they did take the client, and the next day I decided I needed to look bigger, and I was doing the same work as them, same quality. And so I signed up for a limited company, and it was Helena Traill Design at the time, just because I think that comes down to confidence. I had Nooh Studio as a name, but it was just, oh, this is just formalizing me as a creative. Skip forward then kind of another year and a half, and I had a team, and I then took the leap of rebranding it as Nooh Studio, which was really exciting, taking my name off the door.
Yeah.
But what sets us apart, that's taken a while to get to that. It's taken a lot of iterations. At one point I thought it was healthcare because of my book and kind of my experience there. At one point it was like, well, we just do websites. Then it was, oh, maybe it's branding. But actually what we've landed on now is really our process. I mean, it's what we were doing the whole time, but I think, when you're trying to strategize your own work, it's so hard.
Yeah, it's impossible. Yeah.
Absolutely impossible. And so we've realized that our strength that I've working on for the last 5-6 years is co-design, it's collaborative design, it's working with people to create an outcome. And part of that is in storytelling. It's how do you, like, whether it's a podcast, a brand, a book, doesn't matter what the medium is, what the output is, we're not limited to that. It's how do you collaboratively create something? And so we do that for brands and campaigns. That's kind of our core.
So how does that manifest? Because like that feels, though, actually just kind of go into a little bit more detail about what that co-design is, but then how does that manifest and land with clients? Because that is a distinctive and different approach. Like I've worked with other design agencies, and it's usually a case of brief goes in, maybe you have a call to sort of talk through desired outputs, work comes back, and then review cycles, etc. So like what does that co-design look like, and then sort of how do you find that it lands with clients once you sort of start down that process?
So what it looks like is, trying to think the succinct way of explaining it. At the core, it's collaboration. We use design sprints, so we might come together with a client and actually kind of ideate and iterate in the room on post-it notes, on paper, that kind of thing. Or it can be a much longer process in which we actually work with end users, like the stakeholders. So for a brand, I know I was going to talk about one of the case studies. It's kind of the easiest way to go about it. So we did a brand for young people, by young people, for the Co-op Foundation. And so we worked with 15 young people who actually kind of became part of our team. So it wasn't that there's us, the new team, there's kind of the young people, and then there's the client stakeholder group. We actually merged that all together and became kind of as one. And we actually designed with those young people. So we did 1 hour design sprint per week where we literally live designing on screen, which is quite a lot of pressure. And the young people were saying, no, we don't like that. We like that. We gave them homework, and they kind of went away and did design tasks and presented them back. And I think a key to it is like iteration. So, if you kind of look at consultation within design and strategy, where people say, oh, well, I went and consulted a group of young people and asked them what they thought. I believe that co-design is the iterative ongoing loop where you're constantly asking them. You're not just saying, do you like A or B? And, we asked some young people and 90% said they like blue. It's a continual conversation. It's a continual collaboration. That's my favorite bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, in a former life before working for myself, I was part of a product delivery sort of product consultancy, and their whole thing was like that constant move fast, agile, iterative, like product's never done. How do you know when you reach a final point?
Oh, that's a creative process. I always tell my team, you've got to trust the process. I think the difficult thing with code design, within the commercial world, is cost. Because, I'm saying all these nice things of, yes, we're going to chat with young people, but it takes so much time. There's a lot more admin. To do it inclusively, like to do it across different forms of legibility, visual, reading, everything, it's difficult. It takes time. And I think sadly quite a lot of that is then limited by like how much time you've got to do it. As standard, we normally do like a whole round of kind of very open ideas, quite art school, and then kind of start narrowing down, like the whole double diamond triangle.
Yeah.
Where you go convergent, divergent, and like that.
Yeah, I mean, that was literally the double diamond as part of the product discovery stuff we did at Red Badger. Our work there is literally, go as wide as you can to narrow in and then explore each of those in detail. That all makes a lot of sense. So how does that land with clients? Because like from the, like as you sort of described, like doing it together, working together towards a sort of point of that, the second diamond, to make sure that everyone's gone through all of that process, makes a lot of sense, and surely like ultimately you'll reach a better outcome. But like you said, there are constraints in terms of time and money. So how does it land with clients usually?
So it's interesting who's already asking about co-design now. So you think of that co-op example, they're the cooperative, they want to collaborate, they want to work with people. So they were super open to it as part of their brief. Even that as a gold star example, we got to the final week of design, we had 2 ideas, the young people voted for one, and that went through all the stakeholders from #IWill, Co-op Foundation, and other organizations got signed off within a day. And they said, nothing's ever been signed, brand or design has ever been signed off in a day. And so I think that was proof that the process and trusting the audience, the young people, what worked. But obviously, unless you've gone through that journey and then go, oh, I'm going to use that process again, that was smooth. Why would you do it? Why would you spend more money on, I could get a freelancer for 500 quid to design me a logo versus a large co-design process. And I think that's what we're trying to do now within Nooh, is like educate people, explain why. Have I sussed that out yet? I don't know. I think it's a lot more in the value of the process. That's what it's not about the outcome necessarily. It's more in how do you take people on that journey, because the other favorite part is those young people that went with us on that co-op journey, they're so bought into the whole thing, they felt so invested. So when it launched, you've already got your audience right there ready. And so it's like, how do you, effectively selling co-design, how do you say it's about the process, about the values, it's about how we're doing it as a collective, rather than, oh, you've got a logo at the end, but actually you also get a nice logo.
Yeah. I've been involved in a couple of rebrands in my career, like many years ago. One I remember that was a 6-month process that was kind of happening a lot behind closed doors, and was then presented back to the business by the then kind of acting CMO and a member of the agency that had done the body of work. And effectively, to everybody that was on the outside of that process that wasn't involved, it was a new font, a new logo, and a slightly different color palette. And it didn't matter how well communicated the ethos and like what was the thinking behind all of the decisions. It didn't matter how good that kind of presentation was back to the business. Like, people weren't as bought in and invested
on the journey.
No, exactly. And I get, like, from my experience as well, like working with designers, there's an element of trust the designer to do, or working with designers and design agency, that you're the experts. Like, we need you to sort of bring this to life, and trusting you to kind of do that. But there's always that iterative going back and forth, all the review cycles, and that can be a sort of painful process for everyone involved. So is there, like, have you find that sort of working together actually, like, sometimes can shorten the length of a project?
I think they're about the same length of project in terms of where the decision is made. That is definitely shortened, because it means that you're not just saying, maybe here are 2 options, we recommend A. You're actually then saying, well, with all the discussions with the target audience, with those young people, for example, or, whatever group you're looking at, we've all discussed this one, or, we're all backing this one. And so it kind of takes the bias. And, design is so subjective. And when you have lots of stakeholders with all different viewpoints, different visual styles, different ways of working, whereas if you've, as a collective, as that co-design group, decided which one, if someone wants to say, oh, I don't like pink, I want blue, is that a preference, or is that, against the whole thing? Yeah. So I think that's where it really, really helps.
So what else was what was the output of the work with? Sorry, I've got it written down here. So it was with the Co-op Foundation on the Young Game Changers Fund. So how did that project come about from your, like, how did they find you? Like, what was the sort of thinking around that? But then also, like, what was it about? Like, what was the kind of the project itself? What was the output of that of that project? Obviously, you talked about working with the young people. I'm just interested to hear from your side, like the sort of details of that.
So it went through a competitive pitch process, and we won based on our process. So based on the co-design, it was called Innovative, which I was very, very pleased with. That was like a pat on the back moment. And yeah, we did the co-design as the core, and then we effectively made like a brand book, the logo, the branding, all of that stuff packaged up. What was really nice about that project, so the Young Game Changers Fund is for young people, by young people, but that's not just the co-design with a capital D. It was the strategy. The whole thing was created by a board of young people. And so I think it's a 2 point something million pound fund, and different young people had to apply to the fund, and then they were given up to £20,000 to do a community-led thing in their community. And actually, even who was awarded the money was also decided by young people. So it wasn't just that we were kind of creating the logo and doing that piece as a co-design thing. It was the whole ethos of it. And then since it's been used by Co-op to kind of share it, and they've been putting out lots of comms, and it looks smart. So it was really fun.
Yeah, it does look really good. You shared the video on LinkedIn yesterday, and I realised that when this goes out, which might be August, people will have to dig through your activity a little bit. So I'll give you a little nudge to maybe to reshare it ahead of actually publishing this. So your agency is growing. So obviously there's appetite for what you're doing and think you're doing something right. So how have you found that kind of journey building an agency? Like, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've had? And I know that we've spoken before about some of the challenges of like finding of kind of growing a team, like a harmonious team and what have you. But what's the biggest challenge for you now, and like what does the next sort of 3, 6, 12 months look like for you?
Oh, it's a big question across quite a few years. I think the things that came to mind there was, I think a lot of it for me has been confidence, like being a relatively young person. When I started my agency, I was about 23 or 24, walking into a room when you're networking with other agencies, and I'm normally the youngest and sometimes one of the only women in the room. You made a comment about that my clothes are always quite bright and colourful, and that's not for everyone else. It's actually a kind of a boost of confidence for myself to feel like, got this bold pattern on, I can do it. I have a series of power jackets. I have a bright orange jacket, and if I pitch, I wear that.
Yeah.
So that's been definitely part of my journey, is the confidence to say even no to projects. Projects that come in 6 months ago, I'm like, yeah, we'll just do all of it. It's growing, and now it's like understanding where we're good at what we do and how we can do it. I think the other part, 100% talent. And I think that, I've worked with so many talented designers over the years. One's a lot, all much better than me. But actually, it's how do I create the culture of Nooh? So we work quite a lot on our ways of working, or WOW, as we call it. And every month in our all-hands meeting, we kind of go through what those values are, how we actually bringing that to the table. And that's kind of intertwined with our process and how we work with our clients as well. And so, working with a tight knit of designers and making sure there are those values there. But that doesn't mean haven't had the difficulty of hiring and firing along the way.
Yeah, initially when I started working for myself, I was quite arrogant, I think, probably, and perhaps a touch naive. Like, I immediately set out as a limited business, and I had this delusion that I'd be a 10-person agency by, this time next year, proper only fools and horses. This time next year will be millionaires, Rodders type vibe. And increasingly, like as time's gone on, like just hasn't been a reality. Like I haven't grown, or I've been steady with work, but never been in a situation like to hire people. And the more time goes on, and I work with other freelancers on projects, like I bring the right people in for jobs, like the more hesitant I am to sort of take that plunge and bring on a full-time person. Like, what was the trigger for you? Like, what happened in terms of, right, actually I need to bring someone in full time? Was there a definitive moment? Was there a little bit of speculation of like, I could probably manage this myself, but it'd be really good to have someone in? Like, was there a moment, an individual moment
I think I had pretty much from the first year, I had a design assistant working with me, and I think a lot of my tendencies, with ADHD, is that I find it very hard to sit down and focus and just deliver the design work. So I always prioritize being able to outsource like to one junior designer, for example, even if it meant me taking home less pay at the beginning or none at all, because it meant that I could focus on juggling the lots of things, speaking to the people, but especially doing the business development. But then the design was being done by someone who could really sit down and focus. And we talk about it all the time and curate and kind of create stuff together. So I've had, in terms of employment, I think maybe I was naive, especially with the first person I worked with. I was just like, oh yeah, you just pay someone monthly and da da da. But it's been very hard. And actually, I feel like I've got quite a good system now where, yes, I've got in-house designers. Obviously, my income's much more, but I've got an assistant that I work with quite closely, and then designers who can then still concentrate on the design stuff. So I'm almost, there's a barrier now between me and the designers. It's kind of been pushed in the middle by my assistant, which works well.
Yeah. One of the first, we'll talk about building a business with ADHD, is like I am also of the similar sort of vein that I have to sort of force myself and implement deadlines for things to sharpen the focus and get myself and make sure that everything is hitting and arrives with people's inboxes and what have you on time. And like one of the first things I did when I realized that this even existed, like you said, like getting an assistant, was get a VA in. It was a whole world of just things that I did not know about, like going and working for myself and
it's
being able
my
to.
Life. Sounds so cheesy.
It's true though. It's absolutely true. I cannot tell you. I tell, she's in my phone as VA / lifesaver, just because like she manages all the bookings for this. She manages a lot of my diary, making sure that I don't miss meetings, all of those things. And it's never because I want to miss meetings, and I don't now, thankfully. But like staying on top of keeping everything spinning, from managing like the business development side that you have to keep on top of, doing the connections on LinkedIn, doing the networking, doing all of those things, plus then doing all the delivery. It's such and I find it interesting that you, even like right from the start, you were outsourcing work like from the start. Did you know, and I don't know whether you sort of stumbled into this, or was that always just your thinking? It's like, right, I'm going to focus on winning business.
Just by accident, nothing clever.
Really?
And only when I kind of joined the agency networking kind of space and realized, oh, that's why you don't do delivery. It's because there's a thing called like sales, and you can actually press that button. It's not just the word of mouth thing that happens in the pub necessarily. But I now work with a company called Wired Differently, and they specialize in VAs for neurodiverse people. And yeah, like I said, so good. And I actually work with multiple. So I work with one who's better at like the marketing and the writing, and then kind of one who's better with keeping me on track and being strict, kind of surrounding myself with the best people that can help me and my brain. But then there's a balance, because running an agency, it's not just about me and my brain, it's about all the other creatives in it. And so having the VA as kind of an in-between has been super valuable.
Yeah. How are you working with that? Because that's always been something that's been in the back of my mind, bringing someone on, like staying on top of their development, making sure that they have a path forward, that they're learning, they're progressing. Like, how are you finding that as a young founder?
Yeah, I think I try to prioritize it as much as I can, because I realized I was very fortunate that I built a business kind of a bit, based on privilege as well, that in lockdown I could live with my parents, not pay any rent, and could freelance and could take that risk. Whereas so many people need to get straight into that junior design job. And it's so hard, like in London, to get that first design job, going into creative is near on impossible. And so I work with a lot of young people, even say, why don't you start freelancing? You might do a few hours for us a week. And most of the designers that we work with. So at the moment, I've got two designers kind of in-house, and then a wider network of people. And the designer's been with me for over a year now. She started freelance. It was her first proper design gig, and it kind of built up until it was like, oh, you're basically full-time now.
Yeah. So you talked about pressing the sales button, and obviously you're doing like the agency is succeeding and growing, and you've got full-time staff. Like, what does your sales outreach and process look like? I'm always intrigued as to how people.
It's going to be giving all my secrets away.
Well, you don't have to give all of them away.
I don't have any secrets. I call it the magic sales hand, and people might laugh, but it's an actual thing. I had a sales mentor, so I've been very lucky, like through doing this, maybe because also being a young person, people have taken pity on me and helped me. But through the whole process, growing the agency and even having one, I've had different mentors in different
Mm.
places. And one of the really pivotal ones is a sales mentor who I speak to kind of once every quarter. And he runs a big set, like he has a team of 30 just for sales in a big tech company in the city. And he says, Helena, trust the magic sales hand. If you're pressing the button, if you're doing the things, the magic sales hand always comes through. And before I was like, what is he on about? And
Yeah.
actually, I feel like a lot of it is, obviously you've got to hit your numbers. Mine isn't very metric like based. I don't mind, how some people say, oh, have you had your 2 conversations a day? And
Yeah,
have
yeah,
you
yeah.
done this? I think a lot of ours, the word of mouth has been that we go above and beyond. Like we do really good work. Like, I know it's me saying it, but we push the work, like the co-op project. We really pushed the budget to ensure that that was the best we could do, because really my business has only been built from my portfolio. Like it's been project by project, built up by, step by step. And so as
Yeah.
long as the work is super solid, we have cool stuff to share, then I just make sure I'm telling people about it. And I think when I started, I've never been scared. Yes, I wouldn't walk into a room at the beginning and want to network, but I've never been scared of using like Facebook to say, oh, hi, I'm a graphic designer. Do you want me to typeset your book? And actually people don't always realize the value in that. It's like the front of mind piece. And so I've always I just annoy people, I think, sometimes.
It's you have to tell me more about this magic sales hand, but also I
That's
think
it. It's just the hand.
okay, okay, fine. It's
That's
just
it. It's the hand emoji. I'll send you the hand emoji. I'll send you good vibes.
perfect. I'm going to use that. But it's interesting, like you have to be top of mind. You have to be, and there are a lot of people who are designers. There's lots of people who do content and strategy and copywriting, and ultimately you just have to be in the right place at the right time. And there is a numbers game aspect to it, but you do obviously have to nurture relationships too. And like you say about annoying people, but I say this to my clients all the time, like there's only a very small selection of people that are in market for the solution that you're providing at any one time. So and the post that you share about a particular thing is seen by a tiny proportion of your known universe, or outside, or even like if you're spending money like to reach that broader audience, like it's still, you can still reuse, reshare, repost and distribute that way more than people do. Like people write a post once and then it's like, right, that's it, on to the next one. And it's so daft. And it's, you always think like, oh well, because you're the one that's creating it and you're the one that's posting about it, you seem to get, well, you definitely do. I know I do. I get sick of my own voice and my own stuff like way sooner than my target market do. And you sort of have to remember that you're not annoying people. It's probably you keep propping up, and then eventually someone goes, actually, do you know what? Like I do need to talk to Helena. I do need to talk to Dan, whatever that is. So I don't think it's annoying people.
The bit that I find really hard is that, and maybe you've got some tips on this, and I've seen you doing this well on LinkedIn, is the top of the funnel. It's, I'm very good because I tell the personal story. I talk about my book. I talk about, what we're doing and the kind of process stuff, which is then, if you think of the marketing funnel, a lot of that is the bottom. It's the people who are already engaged, already know me, have already worked with us, and I'm just circulating around that group and they go, oh, we've got another project. Whereas the top of the funnel, that bit of bringing new people in, I find really hard because I'm telling quite personal stories. I'm talking about like co-design from a quite detailed point of view, whereas the top of the funnel stuff that does well is like shock horror, put insert stat here, whereas I overcomplicate it because I'm in it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to work on at the moment, but then I don't want to be that person on LinkedIn.
Well, I disagree with you. I think the bits to camera that you do, like the bits where you're walking and you're just talking to camera is really personal.
I've been
it's
trying
really
that.
personable.
But then that's personable for the people who know me and might then watch it because they're like, oh, what's Helena up to today? Whereas if you're a fresh
Don't
kind of
underestimate.
pair of eyes,
Don't underestimate.
I'll see what happens.
Everyone's a lurking gherkin, to steal one of Mel Barfield's phrases. The work that I've generated over the last sort of few months from LinkedIn is from people who have never engaged with anything that I've put out there, but tell me in the comments like, oh, I've been following you for a while, and like you just never know who's
Durkin.
exactly. You never know who's there. So, but I really like it. I think on a platform where you need to stand out and be a person, I think you do a really good job. I think you're.
Thank you. I hope by the time this podcast goes out, my profile just doesn't fall from the face of this earth, and they go, "What's he talking about?"
Yeah, imagine. I can't imagine that. I'm sure you're going to keep going, and I'll prod you to reshare the stuff anyway. So, look, you've typed me as someone who has big ideas, and I know from some of the stuff that you talk about when you're ADHD that you're always awash with ideas. So, what is next for Nooh and for you? I saw you post not too long ago about a thesis that you're working on in healthcare, on health stories.
Yeah.
Like, is that going to feed into what you're doing? Is that a little hint or a nod to
I'm not sure.
direction? You're not sure.
You mentioned, this is a good question. People have been asking. You mentioned, the whole ideas thing. So I write a blog on Substack called The Ideas Machine, and that's been quite fun to just put all ideas in one place. But ideas are only useful to a certain point, and so until you need to do something about them. But I've just finished a master's in healthcare design at the Royal College of Art and Imperial. Thank you. And that was an extension of 100 Stories. So it was, how do you actually use that form of storytelling within healthcare? And we're working now with quite a lot with the NHS. So that's kind of building out that line of work because of that personal interest, that kind of health interest. I have an eye on starting a healthcare design consultancy at some point. I've got a co-founder and we're things bubbling away in the background. But Nooh Studio, really, that's just to make sure that we've got our foundation. We're delivering those good projects. We're shouting about co-design. Like we launched a kind of co-design campaign last month and did this downloadable PDF. Now we're talking about how do we spread more knowledge, like with a deck of cards or something like that. But I think it's just with an agency, I'm a creative. I like the tools. And a lot of the time I'm doing the doing in Nooh Studio, whereas actually kind of the next phase is, how does Nooh Studio keep going? Obviously, I'm always going to have an eye in it. I'm always going to be in it. But how does it kind of deliver really good work and continue the ethos? Not necessarily with me there the whole time, but how do you kind of create that with a group of people and then keep delivering good work? So I don't see myself having a 50, 100 people agency. I've always said 10 people in a room creating cool shit. That's what I've said.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
To the extent.
That's I sort of, again, like when I had the idea that I would grow an agency, I had no visions of being 50, 100. Like just blows my mind to even like just contemplate that. But yeah, literally that, just a group of like good friends, talented creatives, producing cool shit for cool people, basically. 100%. So what does a cool client look like for you? What's an ideal client?
So I think the Co-op Foundation was pretty cool. I think on a personal note, my kind of North Star, and maybe I'll do this one day, is to do like a cancer research campaign co-designed with cancer patients or, with people that have experienced cancer in that way. That has always been or like a Macmillan campaign. That's always been my personal one, because I know they're amazing charities who do amazing stuff, but sometimes some of the campaigns that you see especially within the cancer space, you think like, why have they said that using words like survivor and battling, and everyone has a different opinion, but I'd like to co-design a really epic cancer campaign, like a global one or something. Anyway, that maybe.
Yeah. All right. Well, to anyone from Macmillan who's listening, and I'll make sure to tag them in when I share your podcast.
Give me a call.
Yeah, exactly. So look, I ask everyone this: if you could start again with Nooh, do you think you'd do anything differently?
I'd start with the name. I would have started as Nooh Studio, not Helena Traill Design. I would have wanted to have the confidence to do that from day one, because halfway through, growing into a team and then doing a rebrand, my sales went like that with the change. People don't like change. Yeah. Confuse some people. And I think it was a confidence thing rather than a logistics thing, and I should have just gone for it.
Yeah, I'm sat here really conscious that my name's in my business name as well. So
not your first name though.
No, that's true. That's true. I will ultimately become just Plume, I think, over time. I think my website, which is due in, hopefully by this time this goes out, it will be live. It's only been working on for 4 months, which will just be Plume. So hopefully that will, because I think it's quite nice actually, even if it is my
Yeah,
own name.
I think it's more sticking with it. That's my reflection. Is like
Yeah.
I could have just owned the whole Trail design or Helena HT design or whatever it was, but I
Mm,
wanted to be the Nooh Studio. So it's like, what was a niggling thing that meant I didn't start with that?
yeah. I mean, mine was most definitely a panicked. Just what's something that's available, and this is what I ended up with. But I think, yeah, it's interesting. Was new always in the back of your mind then when you started, just as a
So I forgot about it for about a year, and I bought the domain. And then I went on. I went, oh, that's actually quite clever. When did I? When I don't even know when I bought it, and I bought all the domains and not used them.
look at you, your past self looking after future you. That's
I
quite
know.
nice, isn't it? Quite a nice situation. So that like, oh, I've run out of questions. I thought I
We
had a
want to
question
touch
in
on
mind.
ADHD briefly at the end, or have we done that? What's our closing?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit, didn't we? We talked about managing business and all the spinning all the plates, and you talked about wired differently. I'm just trying to think how I can end it. Oh no, we've gone through my questions, so I don't have any other questions.
They were very good questions.
We've even done the ideal. Is there anything else you want to say about co-design? Maybe for people who are on the fence as a rallying cry to end it, or maybe
Shall I say my favourite tagline?
yeah. So what would be my question to tee that up?
The tagline is creative co-design creates change. It's a good one.
It is. What we
Finished. Done.
finito. We'll just leave all that in. It's just two ADHD heads going, I've run out of ideas.
We're finished now. I just need tea.
So look, Hannah, thank you for coming on. If people want to find out more about co-design, creative co-design, like where can they find you, and what's your advice to people who might be considering it as an option?
You can always find me on LinkedIn, Helena Traill, and Nooh Studio, noohstudio.com, I think it is. But I just think we want to shout more about co-design and that creative co-design creates change. And if you ever want to chat about it, then please do reach out. Love, why not?
Perfect. Right, we'll end it there as my dog goes
I
absolutely
did.
ballistic.
That was good
Thank you.
timing.
Thank you for that.